Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty heavy. We're looking at a modern interpretation of an ancient and, let's be honest, notoriously complex text, chapter 18 of the book of Revelation. We're going to analyze how a contemporary Bible study group really grapples with all its dense symbolism and tries to apply its message to our world today.
So the chapter just drops you right in with this huge dramatic line, a declaration of total and utter ruin. And it immediately makes you ask, right? Who or what is Babylon? If we want to understand what this text is really trying to say, we've got to crack that ancient code first.
And here's the thing. Babylon was basically a code name. You have to think about it. The author is writing this from inside the Roman Empire. You can't just come out and directly critique the most powerful government on earth. You'd be in serious trouble. So this was a clever way to critique the ruling power without inviting immediate persecution. It was a kind of coded resistance.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start by unlocking the code of Babylon, then dig into the symbolism of sin, connect these ancient problems to our modern world, see how it applies to capitalism, and then look at how even well-meaning institutions can stumble. Let's get into it.
The first step in this group's analysis is a really crucial one. They're basically saying, hey, let's look past the surface-level language here for a minute, because they believe the core message, it might not be what you expect at all.
At first glance, when you read the chapter, it seems to be all about carnal sins. I mean, it's a theme you see a lot in ancient critiques of big, powerful, decadent empires, and it's definitely the most immediate, most obvious reading of these verses.
But this is where the group's analysis really pivots. They pose this critical question that challenges that whole literal reading. They're essentially asking, why is the text talking so much about sexual immorality when the real issue, woven throughout the entire chapter, seems to be about the accumulation of wealth?
And that is the crucial point right there. The text isn't just about physical desire. It's using this really powerful, seductive language of lust to describe something else, an all-consuming pursuit of riches and power, a relationship with materialism that's so intoxicating that, as one person in the group put it, you can't see the bad, you only see the good.
So once you start thinking about sin in this way as a form of corrupted materialism, it completely reframes the entire chapter. It shifts from being just a purely moral condemnation to being a really profound socioeconomic critique.
Now, the group makes a really nuanced point here. They're not saying wealth itself is evil, not at all. It's a tool, right? It can be used for good, for building communities, for providing security. The danger, according to this interpretation, is when the pursuit of wealth becomes the end goal itself. That's when it gets tangled up with power and control and starts to corrupt individuals and even entire institutions.
Okay, so if we're going to apply this ancient critique to our world, we first have to establish just how vastly different the economic situation was in the author's first-century world versus our own. And this context, it's absolutely key.
I mean, this contrast is huge. Back in John's time, you basically had the super wealthy and then pretty much everyone else who was just surviving. There was no real middle class. So the critique was aimed at a system of extreme exploitation. But today, the existence of a large middle class really complicates the picture. As the group notes, most people nowadays are accumulating wealth not for extreme luxury, but to provide for their families, buy a home, and secure their future.
So with that modern context set up, the analysis shifts to a surprisingly specific place: the pressures, the pitfalls, and all the unspoken rules of modern corporate life.
A participant brings up this all-too-familiar question from a yearly HR evaluation. You've probably heard it yourself, and it seems so innocent, but it really embodies this core corporate expectation, this relentless drive for upward mobility, for constant ambition.
And this person's response was just so grounded and human, a desire for stability and just a little bit of improvement. But that was seen as insufficient. It didn't fit the expected narrative of climbing the ladder. It really highlights a system that often values ambition for its own sake and demands a game plan for advancement.
In this example, perfectly illustrates a modern parallel to Babylon's lure. The group talks about how a salesperson who's really successful can actually become a victim of that success. The system gets uncomfortable that they're earning so much, so it co-opts them. It offers not more money, but an appeal to power, a management title that often ends up capping their income and piling on the stress.
The critique doesn't just stop with secular corporations, though. In a really fascinating turn, the group applies the exact same analytical lens to religious institutions themselves,
exploring how they too can fall prey to the very same dynamics described in Revelation. One participant shares this deeply disillusioning experience. He talks about walking into the lobby of his denomination's big annual conference and feeling like he was in a bazaar. There were vendors everywhere, guest speakers hawking their own book, online subscription services. The whole atmosphere just felt more focused on fundraising and commerce than on faith.
This anecdote is such a stark example. A small church was closing down, and it wanted its final legacy to be giving its remaining funds to a partner ministry it really believed in. But the central bureaucracy intervened, and after a heated, 2-hour nasty debate, the money was just seized by the larger organization. It never went to the church's chosen successor. It's a powerful illustration of how even well-meaning organizations can become consumed by their own financial concerns and power structures.
And this really brings us to the central, timeless question of this whole explainer. It's a question that, according to this interpretation, cuts across the centuries, from ancient Rome right into our modern lives, our careers, and even our institutions. At what point does the pursuit of security, or stability, or success cross a line and become an idol, taking priority over everything else?